Hi, you're watching ETV Made in Sri Lanka. My guest on the show today is Dr. Tanya Ekanayaka, who is among Sri Lanka's most distinguished classical pianists. Now, apart from being a virtuoso on piano, she's also a linguist and a musicologist. She also teaches at the music department of the University of Edinburgh. Now, Tanya was down on vacation in Sri Lanka just recently, and I was able to have her as a guest on my show. Hi and welcome to ETV Made in Sri Lanka. Today on the show I am with the lovely Tanya on my right at her home here in Kotte, if that's okay to say.
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Tanya, it's great to catch a few moments with you, and I've just heard that you've come here for a few weeks from the UK. Tell us, you've started off as a pianist at the age of 5. And since then you've been performing and studying music quite seriously. What has it been like, the journey so far?
Well, I'm still very much on the journey, I would like to say, to start off with. But yes, I'm told by my parents that I had started to sing in tune before I started to speak. And that might have to do with the fact that my mother was, I think, practicing for a licentiate exam at the time she was expecting me.
Oh, okay.
And my father's an amateur violinist,
so
there was music.
Everything.
Yes, there was music in the house throughout, even before I was born.
Right.
And so after I was born, after they realized that I had seemed to have a penchant for music, they introduced me to the piano. And my mother was my first teacher.
Oh.
And
did that help? Or because usually when you have your own, like somebody close to you teach, you don't take it too seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
But you did.
I must have.
Yeah.
I hear this many times, and I'm not surprised that there can be all tensions between parents, parent-child teaching context. But no, I owe so much to my mother. In fact, she was the one who instilled the importance of technique as well as developing the ear. So she, being a creative person, she used different kinds of techniques to inculcate piano skills in me.
Tanya, you're blessed with a lot of talent, meaning different interests and passions. So your first degree was in language, in English literature?
It was in English literature and linguistics.
Right.
And that was at the University of Peradeniya.
Yes. And right afterwards you went abroad for your master's?
No, not right afterwards. I was employed at the University of Peradeniya as a lecturer.
Okay.
I joined as an assistant lecturer, and thereafter I was taken on as a permanent staff.
Right.
And that was within months of graduating with my degree.
Okay.
I was awarded a scholarship to read for an MSc, that's a Master of Science in Linguistics, by the University of Edinburgh in 2006.
Right.
So I left in 2006, and I've been away ever since.
Right. And you still continued on your music as well?
I did, because after my linguistics masters, I went on to read for a PhD. And the PhD was interdisciplinary, so it was in linguistics and music, or musicology as might be the more relevant term.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify, what does musicology actually mean?
Well, it's a very broad term in many respects, but essentially it is the scholarly study of all aspects of music. So that might include the study of a composition, analysis of a composition, to styles, to genres, to history, to the history of musical instruments, to music in the community, to music and gender, and it goes on and on. But it's a scholarly study, so it's quite academic. And in that sense, you can distinguish it from performance, and that kind of career.
How does it link the two? I mean, I'm sure it gives you this holistic dimension of why you're doing music in the first place.
It does. I mean, the two are fundamentally connected, aren't they? Because on the one hand, one does, I believe, one should be able to play an instrument, at least one, or sing, if one wishes to be a musicologist, because ultimately it's to do with music. And the core of music involves musicians, human beings who play and produce sound. But on the other hand, as a performer, I think one tends to get a very in-depth knowledge of different kinds of musics, about human beings, how they relate to music. And in that sense, it does, I think, feed back into one's identity as a performer. And I found that to be enormously helpful. Yeah.
Well, Tanya has done a lot of public performances, but out of them, her performance or her solo recital at St. Martin's in the Fields in London stands out. Now, if you want to catch an extract of that performance, stay with us. We'll be right back after the break just for that. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching ETV Made in Sri Lanka, and my guest today, as we had a chat before, is Tanya Ekanayaka. Now, you know, her place is that lovely that my producer couldn't resist, you know, getting a piece of everything. So we've come inside her house, and here we are. So Tanya, I think it's time to take a look at the extract from your recital at St. Martin's in the Fields. And I've heard that this series of recitals or concert series has been going on for over 60 years. As old as that, tell me a little bit about your experience.
Well, this is part of the Pianists of the World series, founded originally by Dame Myra Hess. So it's one of the longest running recital series held at St. Martin in the Fields. To be invited to perform in that series was, needless to say, a huge honor.
I'm sure.
And I was deeply humbled. So it was a wonderful experience, all in all. It was a particular honor for me because the program, I played a Bach Prelude and Fugue, followed by Beethoven Sonata, went on to play a piece by Ravel, and the concluding piece was one of my own compositions, which I premiered here. And that, I'm told, became the first Sri Lankan performance, composition rather, to be performed at St. Martin in the Fields. And that, I believe, is what you're going to be hearing now.
Hey, that's really awesome. So I can't wait to hear, but I would like to know what actually spurred you to compose Adahas, Wings of
Wings
Roots.
of Roots. It's Adahas of Wings of Roots. On the one hand, all of my compositions draw on indigenous Sri Lankan folk tunes and musics. And that isn't something that I do deliberately. It has to do with my musical background, which involves a heavy exposure to classical music, as well as kavi, janakavi, virindu, and vannams, and all
Sri
of those
Lankan
things.
traditional music,
So this particular piece involves the adaptation of Tikiri Tikiri Tikirilia and a kavya. And it also is woven around a motif that is based on the keys, the musical keys of the other pieces in the very same program. So that's how I tie together seemingly different genres of music. So on the one hand, Bach, Beethoven and Ravel, I've kind of been influenced by the keys of those to create this motif, and then that's blended in with the adaptations of these Sri Lankan folk tunes.
Well, sounds really interesting. It's time to take a look at Tanya's Adahas of Wings of Roots, performed at St. Martin's in the Fields in London. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching ETV Made in Sri Lanka, and I'm with my guest today, Tanya Ekanayaka, at her lovely home. Well, that was a fantastic recital there, Tanya. And I'm sure, you know, people watching you there, I mean, you're performing at such a prestigious venue, would have opened up a lot of avenues, a lot of opportunities musically for you?
Yes, quite a few. One, I suppose, that does stand out is that I was subsequently invited to be an adjudicator on the international panel of adjudicators for the Hong Kong Schools Music Festival, and that was held this year. It's held annually, so I was invited to adjudicate the piano division of the festival in March this year, and it's the largest festival of its kind, and it spans around 5 weeks.
Whoa, okay. So you were there for about 5 weeks, judging about how many contestants?
I reckon about, I don't know, several thousand.
Right. Oh.
Yes.
Would have been a task, but I'm sure a great experience.
It was a wonderful experience. It was very demanding and very physically grueling, I have to say, but it was marvelous. And I got to listen to performances from tiny little kids up to, you know, teenagers, and just the sheer enthusiasm and the energy was wonderful.
You do a lot of your own compositions, and like you say, fusing folk music, Sri Lankan folk music, with Western pieces, with Western structures as well. If somebody plays a general piece, I'm just curious to know, is there any way, other than your own compositions, is there any way that you can leave your signature, your mark on the piece you play?
Well, I think it is inevitable that when someone performs, plays anything on an instrument or sings, it does become their own, because it's music that's being transmitted through that person, through fingers, through voice. It's a very complicated question that you're asking me in a way, because there's always this debate of to what extent do you make a piece your own, especially when you're playing a piece that was written by someone else and which has a distinct identity reflective of that person. And so it's always about striking the correct balance, and I think that is one of the hardest things to get right for a performer. And some of the best performances reflect that perfect balance of reflecting the composer's style, the genre, as well as reflecting something that is very much the performer's own.
So it could be your own style of delivery. For instance, the way you play the piano might be very different to the way someone else would. The same piece, if you're playing the same piece, perhaps.
Oh yes, of course. You know, everybody's performance of one piece will be different. So perhaps I'm not sure if there's something unique or particularly different to the way I interpret pieces. That I think is up to someone else to determine. I simply do what I think I need to do in terms of relating to the piece and trying and communicating a musical idea to my audience.
Yeah, what comes naturally to you.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Tanya, when it comes to your compositions, what do you think is the direction you're heading towards right now? I mean, I'm sure it changes with your experiences and, as you call, your autobiographical moments. Yes?
Well, all my life, this is something I've done. I've never actually written music, as in I can,
Right.
but that's not how I evolved music. So I
Okay.
simply sit at the piano, and even this piece, Other Halves of Wings of Roots, that you
Right.
just heard, evolved within the span of say 10 or 15 minutes. And that's it. And it evolves as a whole, and it stays like that.
So you remember the arrangement?
Yes.
Just like that,
Absolutely.
within the 15
yes,
minutes?
Yes, and it just stays in my head.
Okay.
And so that's how it's been with all my compositions. Right now there's quite a few floating around in my head. I'm ambidextrous.
And so I hear.
So that as well, I mean, there are a number of things that influence me. That's one.
Right. Just to break down the word, it would mean that you can do a lot of things using both your hands.
Yes.
And when it comes to piano, I think that's a major win, because you use both hands.
Perhaps, yes.
Right.
And also, as I said, my mixed musical as well as multilingual background, you know,
Right.
all of that, because I am a linguist as well, and so all
Yes.
that feeds into how sound evolves through me when I'm
Right.
at the keyboard. And I've also got, it's a bit strange, something called color synesthesia.
Okay.
Which synesthesia is where they say you see something, but you experience it differently through a different sense.
Okay.
So for example, when I see colors, especially vibrant colors, I experience that in terms of sound. Not that there are specific sounds to a specific color, but it's just it triggers our sounds.
Okay.
So I get very excited when I go to fabric shops.
I'm sure.
Because it triggers.
You'll be like a choir.
Exactly. So all of these things feed into my compositions, but I'm heavily influenced, I would say, by the Sri Lankan music.
Wow, this is really very, very interesting. Seriously, I don't think I met someone who said the same thing.
I hope not.
But Tanya, so if somebody is curious as to know how to compose something simple, like they have an idea and they know some music and they want to put something together, what do you think are the basics?
Well, if they can play the instrument for which they've got that idea, I think they just need to sit at that instrument, if it's the piano or violin or whatever, and simply let that creative flow come through.
Right.
There are various ways in which people create music. Some would actually sit down and start to write immediately almost. Some work with an instrument. I don't think there's any rule.
Right.
I think the important thing is to let the ideas flow.
Okay.
And not to inhibit yourself, because I think oftentimes people are nervous and they think there are rules. There are rules, but I think it's not necessary to worry so much about those. Just let your creativity flow.
Well, fantastic, Tanya. I mean, I look forward to hearing you next time.
Thank you.
Over here, and all the very best with your work, with your teaching and your music.
Thank you.
And we hope to catch you soon on ETV Made in Sri Lanka too.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're most welcome. It's time for a short commercial break on the show. When I come back, I have an excerpt of a performance by pianist Jason Kushak that took place at the Galle Literary Festival this year. Jason Kushak, an internationally acclaimed pianist, composer and singer-songwriter, was in Sri Lanka to perform at the recently concluded Galle Literary Festival. Now, Jason studied classical piano at the Royal College of Music in London and decided to take up jazz music because he felt it's easier to make friends playing jazz. What a revelation! So here's Jason leading up to his version of the jazz standard Can't Take My Eyes Off of You at the Galle Literary Festival.
My mother taught me piano from a very early age. And I remember her playing the piano, and I was intrigued by the mystery of the piano. Not only the sounds of the piano, but the vibrations of the piano on our wooden floor. So I would feel as a child the vibration of sound, as well as the musicality of sound. That was my attraction as a kid. And I realized that piano might be a way of also making friends. As an only child, I could make friends very easily. That's probably the reason why I played the piano. classical music is something very deep to me because it reminds me of my childhood. We always had classical music in the background and of my parents, and there's a certain respect you have for classical music. Playing jazz or playing pop genre is always more for peer group and, as I said, friendship. But classical is always something very solid and nostalgia for me. I think the idea of order and discipline in learning any instrument helps you, because at a certain point when you're comfortable and confident, you can always break the order and go to a free type of music if you like. But I think it's very important, as I said, to keep the order and keep the discipline as a means, as a tree would go, to have freedom, the tree to go in any directions. And if the branches are cut, you can always come back to the order.
You're just too good to be true. You know it. I can't take my eyes off you. And you'd be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. You're gonna be shy. At long last, love has arrived. I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off you. Pardon the way that I stare. There's no one else to compare. The sight of you makes me weak. No more words left to speak. And if you feel like I feel, please let me know it's for real. You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off you. Da 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 da. Easy, come on. Da 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 da. Yeah, I love you, baby, and if it's quite alright, I need you, baby, to warm these lonely nights. I love you, baby. Trust in me when I say, oh, pretty baby, don't let me down. I pray, oh, pretty baby. I wanna say you stay. Let me love you, baby. Let me love you. I love doing that. You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off you. You'll be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived. I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off you. Thank you.
Well, it's time to wrap up the show for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to follow us up on Facebook, you can do that typing www.facebook.com/ETV Made in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for your messages so far. We've had a lot of activity on Facebook. Just keep them coming. We'd love to hear from you. It's time to wrap up and say goodbye, but I'll be seeing you soon. Until then, take care.